I was 23 standard cycles old when I entered the Compact's border intelligence track, and I did not believe a single thing the orientation cadre told us about the exclusion zone. That is not arrogance in retrospect. It was a reasoned position. I had grown up in an academic household. My parent pair were historians of the Compact's third-era expansion, and I had spent my formative years learning to ask what institutional incentives used a given official narrative. The Velthoran are not a credulous species by nature. We run fast, we reason faster, and we have a cultural reflex against inherited fear that other species sometimes mistake for recklessness. I called it rigor. The exclusion zone around human space had been formally codified 1,200 years before my birth. The advisory margin was a 40 light-hour perimeter, surveilled by a network of passive relay stations, maintained by Compact Charter, and annotated in every navigational archive with the same flat designation: passage inadvisable, accord of the second convocation, reason sealed. I had read that designation 10,000 times in navigation tables. It always struck me as exactly the kind of language that institutions use when they do not want to explain something. Not a law, not a prohibition with teeth, an advisement. A polite bureaucratic shrug dressed as a warning. In the first weeks of the border intelligence track, the training cadre answered almost no direct questions about the zone itself. They gave us the boundary coordinates. They gave us the advisory margin's technical maintenance schedule. They gave us the signal relay protocols and the reporting structure for anomalous readings near the perimeter. They did not give us a reason. I asked the senior instructor, a Velthorans herself, older than anyone I had ever met, with the gray patterned face markings of a retiree who had come back to teach. Looked at me for a moment without speaking and then said, "The verification rotation will answer you." I thought that was a deflection. I wrote it in my notes as a deflection. The verification rotation was mandatory for all cadets in the border intelligence track. It was not listed in the orientation documents as anything more than a transit observation exercise. Cadets traveled aboard a compact survey tender to coordinates near the advisory margin's inner boundary and stood at an observation post on the surface of a world called Drevethfoss. Most cadets had not heard of Drevethfoss. I had. My academic background was thorough enough that I knew it as a former Dravathi colony world, abandoned approximately 800 years ago, under circumstances recorded in the Compact archive as voluntary strategic relocation. The Dravathi themselves no longer existed as a civilization. They had merged, generation by generation, into two other species through a long process of cultural and biological integration. Their homeworld was now an uninhabited archive site maintained by Compact Charter, preserved, untouched. The ruins of their primary administrative center still stood under an open sky, which the Compact kept clear of debris and atmospheric hazard by a standing maintenance protocol. The charter designation, Monument of Record, reason, Comp Accord 7 Soreth, access restricted to authorized transit. I had always assumed Monument of Record meant a war memorial, or a plague site, or something similarly comprehensible. We set down at dawn in local time. The sky over Drevethfoss was a pale copper color, thin atmosphere, 2 moons still visible at the horizon. The ruins were low and wide. The Dravathi had built in flat horizontal plains, spreading outward rather than upward, and the administrative center was a vast open plaza of stone composite tiles, many cracked now, most intact, surrounded by roofless structures whose walls still stood to full height in several places. The whole site had the particular silence of a place that has been empty for a very long time and does not expect to be filled again. The cadre walked us to the center of the plaza. It stood there, not a ruin, not a fragment, a single slab of stone, approximately 4 meters in height, 2 meters wide, set vertically in a mounting cradle of Dravathi metalwork that had been polished clean by the Compact maintenance detail cell at some point and never polished again. The slab itself was not Dravathi stone. The material was not in any geological database in the Compact's archive, not igneous, not metamorphic, not synthetic by any process the materials division had been able to identify in 800 years of open analysis. It was dark, a near black with a very faint interior texture, like something pressed between layers of compressed void, if void had grain. It had not aged. The Dravathi metalwork around it had oxidized normally over 8 centuries. The slab looked as if it had been set in the cradle that morning. Carved into its face, in formal Dravathi script, the administrative dialect, kind used in official fleet filings, were coordinates, 31 sets of coordinates, and beside each set, a designation. I knew Dravathi script. My academic training included dead languages of the compact's absorbed civilizations. I stood there and read them. The 31 coordinates were the last filled position-sold records of the Dravathi survey fleet that had departed Drevath Voss 803 years ago, a territorial survey mission, formally registered with the compact as a resource assessment exercise, dispatched to a mineral-rich system 14 light minute inside the advisory margin's inner boundary. 31 vessels. Mission filing had listed the ship's names, their classifications, their departure coordinates, and their intended survey position. That filing was in the compact archive. It matched what was on the slab exactly. The fleet had gone silent 6 days after departure. No distress signal. No wreckage. No debris field detectable by any instrument the compact sent to look. The relay stations at the margin had recorded normal passage inbound. There was no record of passage outbound. 40 days after the fleet went silent, this slab had appeared in the center of the plaza I was standing in. Appeared, the archive said, between one maintenance inspection and the next. No delivery mechanism recorded. No transit event logged at any relay station in the sector. The Dravathi government at the time had sent their entire scientific council to examine it and had received no explanation. The material analysis was inconclusive. The compact had been notified and had sent its own analytical team, which had reached the same conclusion. Unknown origin, unknown material, undamaged, unaging, and carved. They confirmed carved, not printed, not etched by any energy process in the known catalog, but physically incised by something that applied precise and enormous pressure, with the pressure coordinates of 31 ships that had not come back. There was nothing else on the slab. No message, no threat, no explanation. Only the coordinates, only the names. The Dravathi had understood. Within one generation, they had quietly, officially, and without public announcement, begun relocating their civilization's core infrastructure to a position 11 light-years further from the advisory margin. Within 2 generations, Drevath Voss was empty. They'd sealed every record of the fleet's mission in the deepest archive category the system recognized. They had submitted a formal withdrawal of the resource claim to the compact in language so careful and so final that the compact's clerks had simply filed it without comment. They had never asked for an explanation. They had known one would not be offered. I stood in front of that slab for a long time. The other cadets were quiet. The senior instructor stood at the edge of the group, and when I finally turned to look at her, she was not watching the slab. She was watching me. I did not file a skeptical report after the verification rotation. I did not file any report that addressed the exclusion zone's validity or the institutional incentives that produced the advisory margin's narrative. I transferred out of the border intelligence track 4 weeks later. I cited a preference reorientation. I took a posting in the compact's internal mapping division, cataloging the known systems in a cluster located 40 light-years inward from the advisory margin. I spent the next 11 years there. People I knew from the track sometimes asked why I had transferred. I told them the work suited me better. That was not untrue. It was simply incomplete. What I did not tell them was what I had understood, standing in that copper sky silence before a stone that had arrived from somewhere no one comes back from, carved with the last coordinates of 31 ships that would not be returning to claim them. The humans had known where that fleet was going before a single signal was sent. They had known the fleet's composition, designated survey position, its departure records. All of it. They had let it cross. They had kept what they chose to keep. And then, explanation and without demand, they had sent back a record. Not a message. A record. The distinction for matters. A message implies a conversation. A record implies a conclusion. I did not want to be in the border intelligence track anymore. I did not want to spend my career maintaining relay stations at the edge of a perimeter that something on the other side had already decided the of. The slab is still there. The compact maintenance detail keeps the plaza clear and does not touch it. It has not aged in 803 years, and it will not age. Whatever it is made of does not diminish. It does not need anyone to keep it legible. The script carved into it is as precise today as it was the morning it arrived. I have not gone back. I do not need to. I read those 31 names once, in the pale copper light of an empty world, and I understood everything the orientation cadre had declined to explain. The advisory margin is not a courtesy. It is an acknowledgement. There is a difference between a boundary you set and a boundary you accept. The galaxy learned a long time ago which kind this one is.